New Testament lesson is from Luke 13, verses 10 to 17. Here's the word of the Lord. Now he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had gripped her for 18 years. She was bent over and was quite unable to stand up straight. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hand on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work out to the done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrite, does not each of you on the Sabbath until his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to give it water? And now not this woman, the daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day." When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. The law of the Lord.
Thankful for our youth and what they have done and are doing. It's amazing to think about youth going for 2 hours to worship every day. Of course, if you're sitting with about 5,000 other youth, it's probably a lot of fun. But we're so blessed to have our families and our youth who are able to make that journey. And thank you for helping me on the reading today. Thank you both of you very, very much. In 1619, that was 400 years ago, and 1 year before Plymouth Rock, a small group of 20 captured Africans were sold into slavery to the British colonies in Virginia. If you have not taken the opportunity, or maybe even never heard of the 1619 Project in the New York Times Magazine, I hope you will do so sometime in the future. It is online. You can access it. There's a number of places you can read these articles. They have been just generally made available, not just from the magazine. And the 1619 Project is a series of articles published 2 Sundays ago, by the way, that takes as its subject the beginning of chattel slavery in the North American continent. The point of the articles, all of which are written by African American scholars and journalists and authors, is to blend the history of this country with the reality of slavery, and to make the argument that everything we have experienced as a nation in our 243-year history up to today including our economy, our politics, the very fabric of our culture, they all have been a product of a nation that was founded on the ideal, the principles of freedom, while at the same time keeping a significant number of its population in bondage. It's a very provocative series, but of course, history is often provocative. It's supposed to be. It's supposed to make us think. In the case of the 1619 Project, one of its primary authors, Nicole Hannah Jones, begins her article with these words: "Our founding ideals of liberty and equality were false when they were written. Black Americans fought to make them true. Without this struggle, America would have no democracy at all." And then she concludes, after making her argument, she concludes her historical case with this very challenging conclusion. "We were told once, by virtue of our bondage, that we could never be American. But it was by virtue of our bondage that we became the most American of all." That has raised some controversy, as you can imagine. But for me, it was interesting. And the fact that it is so rare that we hear the word bondage connected with the word virtue. But that's the whole point of the article. The bondage experience of African Americans created a bond with the ideals of this nation unlike any other people, including its original founders. And according to the idea of the story, it still undergirds all the developing freedoms that have emerged in the present, beyond the Civil Rights Act of 1968. I thought about that connection between bondage as a virtue. And I thought about how that same historical perspective can be easily applied in a spiritual way, as it was embodied by the actions of Jesus of Nazareth. And in the story that Peter just read to you, we see an example of Jesus' radical actions in the Gospel of Luke. Now, he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, and just then there appeared a woman with a spirit that had crippled her for 18 years. You talk about bondage. When Jesus saw her, he called her over and said, "Woman, you are set free from your ailment." When he laid his hands on her, immediately she stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, the minister, the head of staff, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, and not on the Sabbath day." Sabbath day is not a day for miracles from God. Not going to happen. Well, the Lord answered that thought, that very pastoral thought, and said, "You hypocrites, ought not this woman, the daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, he said, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" He's saying, what better day is there than the day we worship God, than to allow God to set us free? When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. The recognition of human bondage is something which Jesus recognizes and challenges throughout his entire ministry. Jesus helps people to overcome the bondage of illness. Jesus helps people to overcome the bondage of religious terrorism embodied in the enforcement of Israel's doctrinal laws. Jesus helps people to overcome the bondage of cultural tyranny when he invites women and Gentiles and slaves to follow him, or when he invites children to come to him, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. In teachings that we know by heart, such as the Beatitudes, Jesus declares that the poor, the hungry, the weeping, the hated, and the persecuted are blessed by God, with a promise that frees each of them from their bondage. A promise. And in that promise is their freedom. Jesus' most powerful, most radical actions, however, are when he encounters the greatest bondage for all created life, the bondage of death. Jesus raises the dead, but this powerful act is just a foretaste of his own resurrection, when by the cross and through God's love, the bondage of sin and death is broken once and for all time. And in all of these instances, there is one consistent and important factor. Human bondage is replaced by a spiritual bond between Christ and those whom he came to free. When Jesus freed those who came to him, those who were in bondage, he didn't just leave them and go, okay, go somewhere. They were given him, or they turned to God. They found their spiritual bonds to God renewed in their freedom. The Gospels display this reality over and over again. Some who are freed from their bondage follow Christ. They become disciples, such as Mary Magdalene, a woman who was freed from 7 demons. That's the description. But everyone who accepts freedom, whether they follow Jesus or go elsewhere, they always walk away from Jesus with a new relationship between themselves and God. A relationship built upon love, not fear, not hate, not law, not bondage. That's why I titled my message today that way. In the Gospels, encountering Jesus provides an opportunity for humanity, for us, to move from bondage to bonded. Now, what do I mean by bonded? Well, several days ago, I went to PetSmart. With 2 cats, sometimes I feel like I live over at PetSmart. They know me there by name. And as I passed by the adoption room, and I saw 2 cats near in a cage, the first thing I said to myself is, no. Then I saw a sign, because I noticed, well, that's kind of odd to have 2 cats in the same pen together. And the sign said, these cats are bonded to each other, so we would prefer that both are adopted into one household. Think about the difference between just the words bonded and bondage. It is so much more than just a few letters. If being bonded represents something important to cats, how much more does it mean to us in our relationship with Christ, in our relationships with each other? Pastor and Christian author Timothy Keller wrote these words in regards to that bond, in regard to these type of relationships. This is what he said: to be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and to be truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God. It is what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense, humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us. Keller reveals the very heart of the way that God loves us. Not as a distant creator who sets the universe in motion, but as one who bonds with us in all of our trials and tribulations and sufferings in life that we face, and bonds with us in our triumphs and our joys. Bonds to us. When we were captured by the bonds of sin, Jesus himself cut those bonds through the sacrifice of his blood and body for us. And in so doing, he freed us to choose how we will live our lives. We have a choice. We make that choice every day when we encounter the world. It is a choice to be in bondage to the world or bonded to the love of God. And if you don't understand the difference, I want to read to you this amazing quote from Henry J. M. Nouwen. It's an amazing quote. It's a sermon in and of itself. Just listen. At issue here is the question: to whom do I belong, God or the world? Many of my daily preoccupations suggest that I belong more to the world than to God. A little criticism makes me angry, and a little rejection makes me depressed. A little praise raises my spirits, and a little success excites me. It takes very little to raise me up or thrust me down. Often I am like a small boat on the ocean, completely at the mercy of its waves. All the time and energy I spend in keeping some kind of balance and preventing myself from being tipped over and drowning shows that my life is mostly a struggle for survival. Not a holy struggle, but an anxious struggle, resulting from the mistaken idea that it is the world that defines me. As long as I keep running about asking, do you love me? Do you really love me? I give all power to the voices of the world and put myself in bondage because the world is filled with ifs. The world says, yes, I love you if you're good looking, intelligent, and wealthy. I love you if you have a good education, a good job, and good connections. I love you if you produce much, sell much, and buy much. He goes on, there are endless ifs hidden in the world's love. These ifs enslave me, since it is impossible to respond adequately to all of them. The world's love is and always will be conditional. As long as I keep looking for my true self in the world of conditional love, I will remain hooked to the world, trying, failing, and trying again. It is a world that fosters addictions because what it offers cannot satisfy, and he finally closes here, the deepest craving of my heart. That's a sermon. So what is the deepest craving of our hearts this morning? If it is not for the love of God, then what else matters? If it is not for the life that Christ teaches, what else is there? The Father yearns to take us this day from bondage to bondage. And the only question for us is, will we let Him? We can ask the world each day, as we often do you love me? World, do you love me? And try to live by its inconstant answer. or we can look at the cross and know that God has loved us. It's done. God has loved us into freedom and bonded us to God's kingdom. And where else do we need to be except God's kingdom?